The Fokker 50 is equipped with an electronic flight instrument system, or EFIS. EFIS is made up of two independent installations that provide primary flight data and navigation data to the captain and to the first officer. Each of the electronic flight instrument systems includes a dedicated symbol generator that processes inputs from various sources for display, two display units, controls for the display units on the on-side EFIS control panels, and annunciations on the overhead avionics panel. The EFIS display units form the glass cockpit components of the Fokker 50 flight deck. These DUs present attitude and navigation displays. Displays that appear on EFIS are provided by two symbol generators. Symbol generator 1 provides EFIS display outputs to the captain's primary flight display and navigation display, and symbol generator 2 provides EFIS display outputs to the first officer's primary flight display and navigation display. Display brightness and display source selections are controlled from the on-side EFIS control panel. Locate both EFIS control panels. That's right. Both EFIS control panels provide identical controls for display selections at the on-side display units. The avionics panel on the overhead panel provides annunciations and control selection for EFIS symbol generator sources, display unit transfer, and an advisory cooling fan in op light. The electronic flight instrument system receives inputs from navigation aid sensors, flight directors, and other aircraft systems. EFIS receives nav inputs from VOR systems, DMEs, the ILS, the ADFs, the radio altimeter, the marker beacon, and the flight management system. Flight director source inputs to EFIS pitch and roll commands, air data commands, and mode logic according to AFCS selections at the flight mode panel. Other inputs to EFIS include heading and course selections made at the flight mode panel, the weather radar system, and display selections made at the on-side EFIS control panels. Inputs to EFIS are received by symbol generator 1 and symbol generator 2. The symbol generators compare data via crosstalk buzzers. Selections for symbol generator output are made at the overhead avionics panel. To check your understanding so far, how would you best describe the function of the symbol generators? That's right. Display outputs from the symbol generators appear on the primary flight displays and navigation displays. EFIS displays use a standard display symbology with designated formats for flight mode annunciations, air data commands, decision height and radio altitude, and advisory and fail annunciations. Details of symbols that appear on the PFD and ND are discussed later in this module. The electronic flight instrument system on the Fokker 50 is controlled by two EFIS control panels located either side of the flight mode panel and symbol generator selections made at the avionics panel. The control panel installed for each EFIS allows pilot display selections at the on-side primary flight display and navigation display. Each control panel incorporates on-off and brightness controls, display mode selectors, display options, and source selectors. Control panel selectors and push buttons will be discussed in more detail later in this module. The avionics panel provides controls for symbol generator fault monitoring and symbol generator selection. Locate the avionics panel in the flight deck. Please touch the highlighted area. The avionics panel on the overhead panel houses controls for symbol generator selection, display unit transfer, and an EFIS cooling annunciator. SG1 and SG2 push buttons incorporate an amber fault light that indicates a fault in the associated symbol generator. SG1 and SG2 push buttons display a white alternate annunciation to indicate that the offside symbol generator is supplying the affected EFIS. In the normal display unit configuration, the display unit transfer push button is blank, and the PFD is displayed on the upper unit, and the ND is displayed on the lower unit. When the transfer push button is pressed, ON is annunciated, and the PFD is displayed on the lower unit, and the ND is displayed on the upper unit. Two primary flight displays, or PFDs, are installed, one for each EFIS. Locate these PFDs on the main instrument panel. That's right. The captain's primary flight display is located above the navigation display on the captain's instrument panel, and the first officer's primary flight display is located above the navigation display on the first officer's instrument panel. Each PFD is made up of a display screen, integral light sensors that adjust the display intensity in response to prevailing light conditions, and a mechanical slip indicator. The primary flight display replaces the more conventional ADI. From the indications on the primary flight display, how would you summarize the main purpose of the PFD? Yes. The PFD also displays the flight director command bars, flight mode annunciations, and air data commands, localizer deviation and glide slope deviation, marker beacon, radio altitude, decision height, and the rising runway symbol. Attitude data is presented on the PFD by the blue attitude sphere and brown hemisphere. A white horizon line divides the sky and ground reference zones. Aircraft pitch and roll is shown by the moving attitude sphere against the fixed yellow and black aircraft symbol on the PFD. Pitch attitude is measured against the white pitch reference scale. Chevrons indicate the direction of corrective action at extreme pitch up attitude. Chevrons at 45, 60 and 90 degrees indicate the direction of corrective action in extremes of pitch down attitude. A moving roll pointer indicates aircraft roll attitude against a fixed roll scale. Roll scale reference marks indicate actual roll attitude. Touch the 45-degree reference marks to identify their location. The 45-degree marks are indicated by the two small inverted triangles. Flight Director command bars appear as magenta pitch and roll bars when Flight Director pitch and roll modes are selected at the Flight Mode panel. Flight Director mode selections will be discussed in detail in a later module. Flight Mode Annunciations, or FMAs, associated with Flight Director modes appear at the top of the primary flight display. Roll modes appear in the top left of the PFD screen, and pitch modes appear in the top right of the PFD screen. Armed roll modes appear in white on the primary flight display. The armed roll modes are VOR, Localizer, Back Course, VOR Approach. During transition from armed mode to captured mode, a white box appears around the captured roll mode. This box remains on the FMA for 5 seconds until mode capture. Captured roll modes appear as a green annunciation in the lateral field of the flight mode annunciator. Active roll modes are VOR, Localizer, Back Course, VOR Approach, Heading, and LNAV. Note from the roll annunciations displayed, the heading mode and LNAV have no armed or transition mode. Pitch modes are displayed in the top right field of the FMA. Armed pitch modes are displayed in white. These modes include ACEL for altitude selection and glide slope. During the transition from armed to captured mode, ACEL and glide slope are displayed with a white box surround. The display remains boxed for 5 seconds to draw pilot attention to the captured mode. Captured pitch modes are displayed in green in the pitch mode field. In this example, captured ACEL indicates closure rate hold to the selected altitude. Captured glide slope is shown by a green GS flight mode annunciation. Vertical speed, IAS, altitude hold, and go-around pitch modes have no armed phase. These modes appear in green in the pitch field on mode selection. To check your understanding of flight mode annunciations, attempt the following tasks. Using the range of FMAs displayed around the PFD, touch the correct annunciations for armed VOR nav, heading, and captured altitude. Please touch the highlighted area. That's right. The FMA correctly displays heading mode with nav armed and altitude capture. Now attempt transition to VOR nav capture and selected altitude capture. Please touch the highlighted. That's right. The displayed FMA indicates transition to nav capture, indicated by the boxed VOR annunciation, and selected altitude capture, indicated by the green A-cell annunciation. The displayed FMA indicates transition to nav capture, indicated by the boxed VOR annunciation, and selected altitude capture, indicated by the green A-cell annunciation. That's right. The flight mode annunciator now indicates that the current roll mode is heading hold and the pitch mode is A-cell armed and captured vertical speed. Note that the vertical speed annunciation in the FMA has an associated air data command display in the bottom left field of the PFD. Vertical speed is displayed in feet per minute below the white CMD annunciation. The IAS mode annunciation is displayed in the FMAs together with an associated air data command display in the CMD field. Airspeed is displayed in knots with a display range from 0 knots to 9,900 knots. The primary flight display provides a radio altitude display from -20 feet to 2,500 feet. On the ground, radio altitude displays 0 feet. Locate the RAD out display on the PFD to confirm its position. Radio altitude is displayed in 5-foot increments from -20 feet to 200 feet and in 10-foot increments from 200 feet to 2,500 feet. A blue decision height annunciation appears on the PFD to display decision height selected at the EFIS control panel. Decision heights are selectable from 0 feet to 990 feet. Below 200 feet, decision height is shown in 5-foot increments, and above 200 feet, decision height is shown in 10-foot increments. A white box appears in the radio altimeter field when radio altitude is less than 100 feet above decision height. An amber decision height annunciation appears in this box when radio altitude is at or below decision height. The PFD displays a rising runway symbol that operates as a function of radio altitude. On the ground, the runway symbol contacts the aircraft symbol. Locate the runway symbol on the PFD. The rising runway appears at 200 feet radio altitude when the active nav system is tuned to an ILS frequency. The symbol provides an absolute altitude reference above the terrain. The current PFD displays glide slope and localizer deviation scales and the runway marker annunciation. Locate these indications. That's right. When do you think the localizer deviation, glide slope deviation, and marker indication appear on the PFD? Yes. Localizer deviation is shown by a green pointer on a white deviation scale at the bottom of the PFD. The localizer display sensitivity is much greater than the coarse deviation scale that forms part of the navigation display. The display is 7.5 times more sensitive in localizer and back-course mode, but only 3.75 times more sensitive if a back-course approach is flown without the flight director. The localizer scale and pointer flash amber following excessive localizer deviation, provided that the localizer is captured and the aircraft is between 500 feet and 100 feet radio altitude. The display returns to normal once the aircraft lateral path is within allowable localizer deviation limits. Glide slope deviation is presented on the PFD by a green G inside the glide slope pointer, indicating glide slope position against the white deviation scale. The glide slope scale appears together with the localizer scale when an ILS is tuned. The glide slope scale and pointer flash amber in the event of excessive glide slope deviation. The glide slope indication returns to normal when the vertical path returns to within the allowable excessive deviation limits. The marker box appears when an ILS is tuned. The blue outer marker, amber middle marker, and white inner marker appears as the markers are overflown. To check your understanding of primary flight displays, locate the area of the DU screen that displays the flight mode annunciations. That's right. Now locate the area of the PFD that displays the rising runway symbol. Yes. When does the rising runway symbol appear? That's right. Examine the primary flight display and determine which description fits the current situation. Please touch the highlighted area. Please touch the yes. As well as the display unit presentations, the PFD incorporates a mechanical slip indicator with integral lighting and two light sensors that automatically adjust display brightness to maintain the selected intensity with changing flight deck lighting conditions, for example, direct sunlight. Failures, warnings, and advisory displays associated with primary flight data are presented by amber or red annunciations on the primary flight display. Some annunciations are common to both the PFD and the ND. Navigation display annunciations will be discussed later in this module. You will recall from earlier in this module that the symbol generators compare displays through a crosstalk link. When attitude, heading, or VHF nav disagreements are outside predetermined limits, comparator display annunciations appear on the PFD. Touch the area of the PFD where you think the comparator displays appear. Please touch the highlighted area. Yes. Comparator displays appear in the top right field of the PFD below the vertical path flight mode annunciations. If the PFDs display a pitch disagreement in excess of 6 degrees, an amber fit annunciator appears on the PFD advising the crew to compare pitch. A roll disagreement in excess of 6 degrees results in the roll comparator annunciation on the PFD. An amber attitude annunciation appears in the comparator display field. Under what conditions do you think this annunciator is displayed? Please touch the highlighted area. That's right. Pitch, roll and attitude comparator warnings are accompanied by a level 2 alert. An amber heading comparator warning is presented if the NDs display a heading disagreement in excess of 6 degrees, provided that the current roll angle does not exceed 6 degrees. The heading comparator warning is also presented if heading disagreement exceeds 20 degrees when roll angle is greater than 6 degrees. Provided both nav systems are tuned to the same ILS, disagreements in localizer deviation, glide slope deviation, and both localizer and glide slope deviation are shown by amber comparator warnings. An amber loc annunciation appears in the event of a localizer disagreement. Glide slope disagreement is shown by the amber GS comparator warning. Disagreements in both glide slope and localizer result in an amber ILS comparator warning. In the event of a flight director failure, an FD fail annunciation appears on the affected EFIS display unit. The associated flight director command bars are removed from the primary flight display, and the on-side flight mode annunciators disappear. An on-side AHARS failure is indicated by a blue attitude sphere and an attitude fail annunciation. The flight director command bars and the flight mode annunciators are removed from the affected PFD. Alternate symbol generator selection is indicated on the PFDs by an amber SG1 or SG2 annunciation. Alternate SG selection will be examined in more detail later in this module. Air data command failures appear in the air data command field. Amber dashes appear if the IAS mode is selected at the flight mode panel and air data computer information is not available. The air data command field is blank if the vertical speed mode is selected and air data information is not available. You will recall that localizer and glide slope deviation scales appear when an ILS frequency is tuned. What do you think the current PFD indicates? That's right. If no valid localizer signal is received, a flag appears over the localizer deviation scale. Note the FMA associated with this indication. Although a valid glide slope signal is received, the glide slope mode is not armed. If a localizer signal is valid, but no valid glide slope signal is received, the glide slope deviation scale appears with a flag. Note that the localizer mode has armed, but the glide slope mode does not arm until a valid signal is received. Radio altitude failure is displayed on both PFDs. Amber dashes appear in the rad alt field, and the rising runway symbol is removed. To recap on PFD fail annunciations, decide which of the following best describes the displayed PFDs. Yes. What is the probable cause of the display on the captain's PFD? Please touch the highlighted area. That's right. A PFD display unit failure blanks the affected screen. In this situation, the display unit transfer push button could be used to display the PFD on the functioning unit. A symbol generator failure produces an SG fail annunciation in the on-side PFD and ND. In this instance, the alternate source would be selected. When the primary flight display and navigation display are both first switched on, the navigation display defaults to the full ND mode. The aircraft symbol, located at the center of the compass card, displays aircraft reference with respect to the selected course and heading. The lubber line at the top of the compass rose indicates aircraft magnetic heading. The blue heading bug on the circumference of the ND rose indicates the selected heading. The heading display field indicates a digital readout of the selected heading. The heading bug is controlled by a remote rotary switch. Touch the panel in the flight deck where you think the heading selector is located. Heading selections at the flight mode panel rotate the heading bug around the compass rose on both navigation displays. The digital heading readout increases or decreases depending on the direction of rotation. The yellow course pointer displayed inside the compass rose indicates the selected course for the current VOR or localizer navigation source. Selected VOR or localizer course is indicated by a yellow digital display in the course display field. If the FMS is selected as the primary nav aid at the EFIS control panel, the course pointer will display the desired track to the next waypoint. Course selections for Course 1 or Course 2 are made at the Flight Mode panel. The course deviation bar shows VOR or localizer course deviation against the deviation scale. When tuned to a VOR station, one dot of deviation represents 5 degrees. In ILS mode, one dot of deviation represents 1¼ degrees. In FMS mode, each dot represents 2½ nautical miles cross-track. The to from indicator appears as a white triangle in the course pointer. The indicator is removed when the VHF nav receiver is tuned to an ILS frequency. Navigation source information is presented in the top right field of the navigation display. The annunciation indicates the primary navigation source for the on-side EFIS. DME information is displayed below the nav source display if it is available from the tuned station. In FMS mode, the distance indicated here is the distance to the 2 waypoint. To check your understanding so far, which ND do you think is currently displayed below the captain's, first officer's, or could it be the same display for both of them? Please touch the highlighted area. That's right. When an ILS is tuned, the glide slope deviation scale appears on the navigation display and, as you will probably recall, the course deviation bar also increases sensitivity. If glide slope deviation is excessive, the deviation scale flashes amber. The deviation scale presentation returns to normal when deviation is within limits. Bearing source displays can be selected onto the navigation display from the on-side EFIS control panel. Bearing source display 1 is indicated by a blue circle together with ADF1, VOR1 bearing source, or FMS. Bearing pointer 1 is indicated by the blue single pointer and circle in the compass rose. Bearing source 2 is indicated by the green diamond and VOR2, or ADF2 bearing source. Bearing pointer 2 is indicated by the green double pointer and diamond in the compass rose. The navigation display also indicates ground speed or time to go and heading synchronization. Locate the heading sync display on the ND. Please touch the highlighted area. The heading sync appears on the ND when slaved mode is selected at the on-side compass panel. The display indicates AHRS synchronization. If the sync bar is out of center towards the plus symbol, slaved magnetic heading is decreased. If the sync bar is towards the circle, slaved magnetic heading is increased. In directional gyro mode, the heading sync display is removed. The ND indicates directional gyro mode with the DG annunciation. Ground speed and time to go appear as a function of DME in the bottom right field of the ND. Ground speed is displayed in knots, and time to go is displayed in minutes. In FMS mode, the time to go to the 2 waypoint is displayed. To recap on full mode navigation displays, examine the ND below. Which indication on the ND is incorrect? You may recall from earlier in this module that the to from pointer is removed when an ILS is... That's right. Now decide which description best fits the displayed ND. Please touch the highlighted area. Yes. The ND full mode also displays the weather radar status annunciation. Note, however, that weather radar can only be displayed in the ARC and MAP modes. Selection of the ND arc mode at the EFIS control panel displays a 90-degree segment of the compass rose. The majority of the indications presented in the arc mode are common to presentations in the full mode. In addition, selection of an ILS presents the glide slope deviation scale on the ND arc mode. Excessive glide slope deviation is also indicated by the amber flashing scale. Note that the course pointer, deviation bar and bearing pointers display the head or tail of the pointer depending on bearings and selections. In arc mode, actual heading is shown by a digital display on the lubber line. Selected heading is indicated by the selected heading display and the heading bug on the compass segment. What do you think happens to the heading bug when the selected heading is beyond the current arc range? Please touch the highlighted area. Yes. The inner range ring and range displays on the arc mode are a function of the weather radar system. The range display and ring indicate half the range of the current arc mode. Range selections are made at the weather radar control panel. The range display defaults to 100 nautical miles when the PFD and ND are switched on. Weather radar displays can be presented on the ND arc mode through selections made at the weather radar panel. Weather radar displays will be discussed later in this module. The map mode displayed on the ND is a 90-degree forward compass segment that indicates course line and active nav aid. Ground speed time to go field, primary navigation source, the heading bug, selected course, heading sync display, and selected heading digital display are common to the full, arc and map mode. These displays are not shown on the full mode. Which summary best indicates displays shown on the arc and map mode but are not shown on the full mode? Please touch the highlighted area. Yes. Arc and map both display a heading arrow if selected heading is out of range and actual heading. As you may recall from earlier in this module, arc and map mode can both display range rings and weather radar information. The ND full mode only displays weather radar status. Presentations that are unique to the map display include the yellow deviation pointer on the deviation scale, the to from indication next to the selected course indication, which shows the direction of the VOR, and the course line. The solid course line indicates the inbound course to the VOR, and the dashed line indicates the outbound course from the VOR. The active navigation aid is shown as a magenta VOR symbol. If the desired course is set to a station that is out of display range, a solid or dashed line is shown with an arrow to indicate the selected course. You will recall from earlier in this module that the ND full and arc modes can display various pointer sources depending on selections at the EFIS control panel. What sources and pointers do you think can be selected and displayed in the map mode? That's right. If the bearing source displays are ADS, when the map mode is selected, no pointers are shown on the ND and no source symbols appear in the source display fields. When VOR1 is selected for display, the blue VOR symbol appears in the bearing source field, and VOR1 appears on the ND if it is within the current display range. If VOR2 is selected for display, a green VOR symbol appears in the bearing source field. If VOR2 is also the primary navigation source, the symbol generator places the green VOR symbol over the magenta active navaid symbol, resulting in a white navaid display. Note, for EFIS to be able to display the navaid symbol, the selected navaid must be a co-located VOR DME. The map range rings are a function of selections at the weather radar panel. Weather radar status appears above the bearing source field. Weather displays in map mode will be discussed later in the course. Note that ILS data does not appear on the map display. On selection of an ILS frequency, the ND defaults to the previously selected full or arc display. In FMS mode, the active flight plan is indicated by a white line. Waypoints along the active flight plan are identified by the waypoint symbol and by a three-letter identifier. The blue waypoint identifier displays positions and identification of the next waypoint in the active flight plan. Cross-track deviation is displayed in nautical miles left or right of the FMS desired track. Amber dashes indicate that nav information is not available. ND failures and invalid source data presentations are the same in all navigation display modes with the exception of localizer failures. You will recall from earlier in this module that ILS data is not displayed in map mode. Localizer and glide slope source failures are presented on the ND in arc and full modes only. All other invalid signals or failure presentations are common to ND, full, arc and map modes. For instructional purposes, the screen now displays all three of these modes from the first officer's side. You will know, however, that this configuration cannot be displayed in the flight deck. Primary nav source is displayed in the top right of the ND. In the event of a primary nav source failure, the ND presents a course deviation invalid display on the course deviation scale. The course deviation bar or course deviation pointer and to from indication are removed from the ND. The course pointer, however, remains displayed. If DME information is not available, amber dashes are displayed in the DME field in place of distance information, and the ground speed time to go field is replaced by amber dashes. With no DME information available, navaid data is removed from the map mode display. Selecting DME hold at the DME panel presents an amber H and dashes in the DME field and a ground speed time to go fail indication. An amber annunciation in the nav source field indicates that both EFIS installations are displaying the same primary nav source. Navigation source selection and cross-selection will be discussed later in this module. Heading selection failure places amber dashes in the heading select field, and the heading select bug is removed from the navigation display. A heading failure displays a red heading fail flag at the top of the compass card, and displays dashes in the course and selected heading field. Note that a heading failure also removes the course pointer and course deviation scale from the navigation display. A display unit failure on the ND is indicated by a blank screen. A symbol generator failure on the ND is indicated by the red SG fail flag. To check your understanding of navigation display failure annunciations, examine the 3 NDs displayed below. Which ND indicates that no DME data is received? Yes. With no DME received, distance and ground speed time to go information is removed from the ND. Which of these ND screens indicates an on-side AHARS heading failure? That's right. An on-side AHARS heading failure is indicated by the heading fail flag and removal of the course deviation indicator and course pointer. What does the remaining ND indicate? Yes. Locate the areas which indicate a heading select failure. That's right. As you will recall, in the event of a selected heading failure, amber dashes replace the selected heading display and the heading bug is removed. As you will recall, 2 EFIS control panels are installed in the flight deck. Each EFIS control panel allows selection for brightness, display, mode and pointers for the on-side EFIS installation. The EFIS control panels are located on the glare shield panel either side of the nav tuning boxes. Touch the captain's EFIS control panel and the first officer. That's right. Both the captain's and first officer's control panels are identical. Only on-side display selections are possible from these panels. Each EFIS control panel has controls to switch on and control the brightness of the on-side PFD and ND. Locate the PFD and ND selectors on the EFIS control panel. The outer knob of the PFD selector has a detent off position. Moving the knob out of the detent switches on the PFD. Further rotation of the knob adjusts the brightness of the primary flight display. The inner knob of the PFD selector is used to select decision height. In the detent off position, no decision height is displayed. This knob incorporates the EFIS test push button. The ND selector combines 2 brightness control knobs. The outer selector is used to switch on and control the brightness of the navigation display, and the inner knob is used to switch on and control the brightness of the weather radar information displayed on the ND. 2 bearing pointer selectors are located on the EFIS control panel for selection of bearing pointers on the navigation display. Bearing 1 selector displays the circle bearing pointer on the ND. The selector can be positioned to off or to display VOR1 or ADF1 or FMS. Bearing 2 selector displays the diamond bearing pointer on the ND. The selector can be positioned to off or to display VOR2 or ADF2. We will examine the operation of these pointers more closely later in this module. The navigation display mode push buttons allows the pilots to exchange the full arc and map mode displays. The full arc toggle push button allows selection of the full compass rose or 90 degrees compass arc. The map push button allows selection of the map display at the ND. The ground speed time to go push button allows the pilot to toggle the displayed data between the ground speed and the time to go. Which description correctly describes the location of the ground speed time to go display? Correct. The Flight Director Command push button allows the Flight Director command bars to be removed or displayed on the PFD during appropriate phases. The nav source push buttons allow the pilot to select the primary nav source for display. Normally, nav1 or FMS is displayed in the captain's ND, and nav2 or FMS is displayed in the first officer's ND. The PFD is switched on and the display brightness is adjusted using the outer knob of the PFD selector. Rotate the knob clockwise out of the detent position to switch on the PFD. The navigation display should be selected on. Normally, both the ND selector and the weather radar display selector are switched on and adjusted at the same time. Switch on the ND and weather radar display. The ND nav display defaults to the on-side nav source when power is first applied. Which EFIS is currently displayed? The captain's, the first officer's, or could it be both? The captain. Please touch the highlighted area. Yes. The offside navigation source can be displayed by the captain and first officer by pressing the nav1 or nav2 or FMS push buttons. Assume you are currently in the right-hand seat and select the captain's VHF nav source. Please touch the highlighted area. The first officer's ND now displays VOR1 as its primary nav source. Course data is now taken from course selections made at the captain's course selector. Note that the offside source selection is shown in amber. The captain's ND also displays an amber VOR1 annunciation to indicate that a nav source cross selection has been made. Momentarily pressing the FMS push button selects FMS as the primary navigation source. FMS and DTRK are enunciated on the PFD. VOR2 is selected as the primary nav source by pressing the nav2 push button. Select the on-side nav source at the first officer's EFIS control panel. With the on-side nav source as the primary nav source and no cross-source selections, the amber VHF nav annunciation is replaced by the white nav source annunciation. Cross-selection of VOR and ILS sources is possible. Selection of the full arc and map modes on the ND is controlled from the display mode push buttons. Pressing the full arc toggle button exchanges the full compass rows for the 90-degree compass segment. Display the arc mode now on the ND. The ND arc mode presents a 90-degree arc. The display can be returned to the full mode by pressing the full arc push button again. The map display can be selected by pressing the map push button. Display the map mode at the ND. Map mode is displayed on the navigation display provided a VOR frequency is selected. The FMS may also be selected as the nav source. The display reverts to the previously selected full or arc mode if an ILS frequency is selected and the ND is in the map mode. Pressing the map push button again in the map mode does not change the map display. Map mode is deselected by making a new display mode selection. Now return to the full rows mode display. The ground speed time to go display is selected using the ground speed time to go push button. Press the appropriate push button and observe the change in display. Pressing the push button exchanges the ground speed for the time to go display. You will recall from earlier in this module that the displayed data is dependent on DME information. If flight director information is no longer useful, or for pilot convenience, the flight director command bars can be removed by pressing the flight director command push button. Remove the flight director command bars from the current PFD. The flight director bars are restored by pressing the push button again. Restore the flight director command bars. Decision height, displayed on the PFD, is selected by rotating the inner knob of the PFD selector. Set the decision height to 200 feet. Please touch the highlighted area. Notice that the blue decision height is displayed in the lower left field of the PFD. When do the white decision height box and the amber DH annunciation appear on the PFD? Please touch the highlighted area. Correct. Bearing pointers can be selected onto the ND full mode and ND arc mode from the bearing 1 and bearing 2 selectors on the EFIS control panel. You will recall from earlier in this module that no bearing pointers are displayed in the map mode. ADF1, VOR1 and the FMS sources from the left-hand side are displayed as ADF1, VOR1 or FMS. Bearing source 1 is indicated by the circle pointer on the ND. Select VOR1 for display on the ND. The bearing pointer appears on the ND and the bearing source display indicates the EFIS selection. Now select ADF1 for display on the ND. ADF1 bearing is displayed with the same symbology as VOR1. Note the bearing source display indicates that ADF1 has been selected. When the bearing 1 selector is moved to the FMS position, The bearing pointer displays the FMS bearing to the next waypoint. The bearing source is also displayed. Now select FMS as the pointer source. Now the bearing pointer shows the bearing to the next waypoint. Selection of VOR2 and ADF2 is via the Bearing 2 selector, indicated by the diamond on the EFIS control panel and ND. Select VOR2 and then ADF2 onto the display and examine their presentation. Note the bearing source display. Now display ADF2 on the ND. At the moment, the ND displays ADF1 and ADF2. Under certain conditions, the VOR bearing pointers are removed from the ND. To check your understanding, which summary best describes when the VOR display is removed? Please touch the highlighted area. That's right. You will recall that no bearing pointers are displayed in map mode. A VOR station, however, can be displayed if it is within range and if it is a VOR DME. Select the map mode at the ND. VOR2 is the active nav source, shown by the magenta VOR symbol on the course line. VOR2 is also displayed in green as the bearing source. The ND has placed the VOR2 source on top of the active VOR2 symbol. If VOR1 is also selected for display in the map mode, the blue VOR1 symbol appears in the source display. If the VOR is within range, it is displayed on the ND. If VOR1 is tuned to the same station as VOR2, the ND locates the active blue and green symbols on top of each other. The result is a white display on the ND navaid. The electronic flight instrument system test is achieved by pressing the test button on the decision height knob. For the test, the autopilot command push button should be set to the side to be tested. Normally, the test patterns are displayed for as long as the test button is held pressed. For instructional purposes, the test patterns will remain on the DUs. Perform the EFIS test. With the test button held pressed, the displayed test patterns appear on the PFD and ND. Note the failure flags for attitude, heading, localizer and glide slope, and decision height on the PFD, together with 40 feet RA and the marker display unique to the test pattern. The ND test pattern displays a heading fail in full mode, together with fail flags for course, primary nav source, glide slope, course deviation, selected heading, and ground speed. Note that bearing sources are displayed, but no pointers appear. During the system test, the flight mode panel push buttons illuminate and a level 2 alert is generated. A symbol generator fault is presented on the overhead avionics panel. 2 seconds later, a compare attitude warning is presented on the central annunciator panel. Releasing the test push button restores the previously displayed PFD and ND. Operation of the EFIS test function is inhibited in flight. A symbol generator failure causes both display units on the associated system to blank. A symbol generator fault displays a red cross on both of the affected EFIS display units. A symbol generator fault is accompanied by a Level 2 alert and a local fault light on the affected symbol generator push button on the overhead avionics panel. Switch the affected symbol generator to alternate to remove the fault annunciation. With the alternate symbol generator selected, the EFIS display receives information from the offside symbol generator. A single source is indicated by the common symbol generator annunciation. In this example, symbol generator 1 is providing display information for both EFIS installations. When an alternate symbol generator is selected, control of the display units is from the offside EFIS control panel. Only one symbol generator can be selected to alternate. Selection of alternate cancels the current onside flight director mode. Comparator displays appear on the PFD when pitch and/or roll attitude disagreements fall outside determined limits. When do roll disagreements appear? That's right. Comparator displays for pitch appear if pitch disagreements are greater than 6 degrees. If pitch and roll disagree by more than 6 degrees, an amber attitude annunciation appears. You will recall from earlier in this module that heading comparator warnings are dependent on the current roll angle. In the event of a pitch, roll, or attitude disagreement, a comparator warning accompanied by a Level 2 alert is presented, and an amber compare attitude warning appears on the central annunciator panel. Following a pitch, roll, or attitude comparator warning, primary flight data can be verified against the standby horizon. Following a heading comparator display, how would you verify heading displayed at EFIS? Yes. As you will recall from earlier in this module, provided both nav systems are tuned to the same ILS, Disagreements in localizer deviation, glide slope deviation, and both localizer and glide slope deviation are shown by amber comparator warnings. During normal operation, selections at the EFIS control panel affect displays at the on-side display units. In the event of a left EFIS control panel failure, Symbol Generator 1 makes automatic selections for display. Current and further EFIS control panel settings are ignored. The automatic selections display the full compass rows. Nav source 1 as the primary nav source, and BOR 1 on the bearing pointer 1. Note that bearing source 2 is not displayed when the left EFIS control panel fails. Which default displays do you think appear if the first officer's control panel fails? Please touch the yes. You will notice from the display that no bearing pointer 1 is presented following a right control panel failure. Further selections at the affected EFIS control panel do not affect the default navigation display.
The Fokker 50 is equipped with 2 electronic flight instrument systems. Display for each system is controlled from the on-side EFIS control panel. Each control panel incorporates on-off and brightness selectors,
display mode selectors, display options, and source selectors. The primary flight display and navigation display are selected on by rotating the display selectors to the desired brightness. Switch on the PFD and then the ND. Now switch on both the ND control and the weather radar brightness should be selected on and adjusted. The EFIS control panel allows selection of bearing pointers, navigation display modes, ground speed time to go displays, flight director command bars, navigation source, and decision height. EFIS can be tested by pressing the EFIS test button. Perform the EFIS test. The EFIS test continues as long as the test button is held pressed.
The primary flight display provides the pilot with attitude data, and the navigation display provides the pilot with heading and navigation data.
Comparator displays, excessive deviation, failures and relevant faults are displayed on the EFIS display units and on the overhead avionics panel. In the event of an SG failure, the alternate system can be selected.